Welcome! Thank you so much for joining me on the Socially Delightful podcast. I'm Jewel, human connection enthusiast and your host, and this show is all about delighting in yourself, delighting in socializing and others, and creating truly supportive, delightful friendships and relationships, even in our modern world with our modern stress. In this podcast, we have fun creating a new culture of living in social delight. Now let's dive into how we're going to do that today. Thank you so much for joining me, especially for this episode. Wow, you're a freaking real one, because today we're going to be talking about fighting for social change using connection, combating political indoctrination, getting involved locally, and avoiding burnout while we do it. It is a big conversation today. Oof magoof, y'all. I have spent so many hours looking into things for this episode. I'm so excited to share it with you, because if you want to make a difference in our political system and be better at swaying people, same. So we're going to be talking about fighting compassionately. I'm also going to share thoughts on being friends with people with different political affiliations than me. So we're going to have a conversation about that as well. It's going to be a long episode. It's going to be really jam-packed, really important. So regardless of where you stand, I do think this is going to be eye-opening as hell. I do want to say I definitely lean one way on the political spectrum. This is not without bias, but I really want this to be a friendly environment for anybody's political beliefs. Fighting compassionately and fighting with connection, and what that means, the principles of that we're going to be talking about today are the same principles that had my partner completely change this one guy's mind in one conversation. My partner met this one guy that was like, "It is weak for men to go to therapy. Nope, no therapy for men. That's weak. They shan't do it." And at the end of the conversation, my partner actually got this guy to agree with him and to be like, "Yeah, I guess it is weak for men not to go and face their problems when it's so hard to do in therapy." Y'all, that is a stark freaking difference. Am I right? Wow. I'm not going to get into political arguments. There are a lot of great resources where you can learn more. I'm going to link some of my favorite educators that know a lot more about policies, keyword policies, than I do down below. I'm going to spend even more time on this episode linking those creators for you guys, so appreciate me. But let's get into it. So this whole election process, I was surprised at how angry I was at some of my friends for how they voted, if they didn't, or even how active they are civically or not. Now, I want to start by saying this is my situation, and when it comes to you, nothing is an all or nothing situation. Nothing is like black and white. There is a gray scale here. Every friendship is unique because the people in it are unique. And it's such a case-by-case basis. But in my case, I processed my emotions, and I recognized that it wasn't worth ending some of my friendships over, especially with one of my best friends. I get so much out of this friendship. I have been inspired to laugh more, be more joyful, to have more fun, to celebrate other people so big because of this friendship. And this friend and I have a lot of values in common, and humanitarian values at that. I realized I wanted more people in my life that were going to be like, "Hey, let's go to this event," or "Hey, I just learned this about this social justice concept." And I realized that most, not all, but most of my life counsel, most of my closest friends won't do that. And that is not for me to hold against them, in my opinion and in my case. So to put it in a different perspective, years ago, I had a group of friends. And this group of friends, we didn't hang out as often as I would have liked, and we didn't get as deep as I would have liked. And I realized I wanted friendships where I could go do a bunch of different activities and where we could have really deep conversations. So I went out and learned about friendship science. I unshamed and released social perfectionism, worked through high functioning social anxiety, became the most confident version of myself, the most charismatic where I could connect with anyone. You know that journey? That one that I talk about? I did that. And when I made these new friendships where I could have these deep conversations and do a bunch of activities with, it made my original friend group more fulfilling for me. Because I wasn't resentful at them for not meeting these needs of mine. I could appreciate the roles that they played in my life instead of being resentful at them for not wanting to do these activities or get deep with me. I mean, take care of yourself, y'all. And for me, that really looked like recognizing that civic duty is something that I want on my life council. I want more of on my life council. And again, case by case basis, set your boundaries. I am certainly not trying to tell you what to do. And I am certainly not homies with people that are bluntly racist, homophobic, and that voted for Trump because they treat him like he's a god. And you might be like, yeah, Jewel, but like you're friends with people that are like covertly racist and sexist. Yeah, but aren't we all in some ways like... I know I still have biases. That's what I'm actively working to unlearn. I don't know. Hear me out.
I bet deep down inside you're a little racist.
So some of you might be like, well, Jewel, how could you be friends with somebody that's voting for someone that is taking away someone else's rights? And it's clearly because you're privileged. And I am privileged. And also, I say this because I think a lot of us have gotten out of touch with each other. And I don't believe that the solution to this problem is becoming more out of touch with each other. However, again, case by case basis, you decide if you want people to be in your life or not. That being said, if you're interested in solutions and moving forward, spoiler alert, that does involve being in touch with people that don't think the way you do. That's what it means to fight compassionately and to fight with connection. So, I want this to be valuable regardless of where you are at on the political spectrum. And so I just want to start by saying as a big old grand message to everybody, wow! Like principle number 1 of fight with connection, we gotta stop making fun of each other as much. My goodness. And y'all, I have to check myself from sharing memes all of the time. I am not saying like don't have a good laugh, don't share that with maybe your bestie that has the same beliefs as you, do your thing. But think about what this does, this constant making fun of each other, what this does. Because it's going to have people feel shame and talked down to. And what are you going to do if you feel shame and talked down to? Listen? Nah, you ain't doing that. I also think overall in our culture that this has really hurt our ability to connect with each other, to come together and fight for the change that we want to see in the world, because we have made people of the opposite party caricatures. We've made them like these cartoons. Like, no matter what, it's this delusional cartoon, you are this one thing. But they're not caricatures, they're people. And most people in the world think that they are good and reasonable. Most people think that they are a good and reasonable person. And again, this advice goes both ways. I found a lot of research for how we can sway the right. I really had a hard time finding anything at all to sway the left. Do with that what you will. So, for the right and swaying conservatives, honestly too, I know my demographic of this podcast. I know where y'all mostly land. I'm sure y'all can tell who I voted for. I think this is helpful either way. Anyway, for swaying the right, if you are living paycheck to paycheck, which most Americans are, by the way, even in the middle class, not just the poorest of the poor, the middle class is still really struggling to afford to live comfortably and enjoyably. So that's stressful. And if you're in a stressful situation and you don't have a lot of time, you know what's going to be really compelling? Somebody making grand promises with so much certainty and confidence, aka Trump. And I actually want y'all to think about this on a brain-based level. We're going to be talking about the conservative brain, the neuroscience of conservatism, the neuroscience of conservatism. I said what I said. Sources down below, y'all. The amygdala, which is arguably the fear center in the brain, is larger in conservatives than in liberals. Let's think about that for a second. Researchers have even found that when adult liberals experience a physical threat, their political attitudes become temporarily more conservative. Y'all, think about the catastrophizing that Democrats do for a second. The fear-mongering, the big statements of doom. And don't be wrong, there are some urgent matters at play. And the catastrophizing, in my opinion, helps nobody. It also just stresses Democrats out. But think about what that is doing to a conservative brain. They're fear-based brains. That's going to make them run more to Trump that's telling them they don't have to worry. I'm not saying don't speak out on policies or things that are wrong. I'm saying overall, we need to cool it on the shame and cool it on the catastrophizing. That's not going to get us anywhere. And I'm going to talk a bit more about what can really get us somewhere. But I want to start by saying that as someone that identifies as a social worker, that really thinks of themselves as a sociologist at heart, I care so deeply about uplifting marginalized identities. But one thing that I have realized as well is that many Dems who typically tend to be more aware of social injustice just shit on those that are unoppressed. Which, yeah, a lot of nuance I could say to this. But is it effective in changing somebody's mind and fighting compassionately? No, because again, what do you do when you feel shame? We know that by now, don't we, babes? Like, for example, if you are a white dude that is seeing a bunch of posts that are saying men are trash, men are trash, men are trash, who are you going to listen to? NPR that's talking about feminism, or Joe Rogan? And what are you going to think that feminism is? Right? This perspective it's really easy to see that this is not going to have men look at their biases and open up to understanding what feminism actually is. And some of y'all might be like, okay, well, it's catering to people. We're talking about fighting for social change. And why do we want social change in the first place? Because we care about all humans. I really adopted this mindset from Loretta J. Ross, and she is an activist in the space that I encourage you all to all check out. I'm going to be talking more about her work later on. But I also think that this is one way that I can really use my privilege. Because, for example, if someone that is LGBT is struggling to feel safe to talk to a conservative like this, I would much rather it be me who does the work of fighting compassionately and with connection and having these conversations with conservatives, right? Okay. Now, one thing I see quite a bit on the internet also is that a lot of people understand that some conservatives are in a cult. And I mean, we have pretty solid evidence of that. QAnon Come on. And the leader of cult academia, Stephen Hassan, wrote a book called The Cult of Trump. But I think we also misunderstand what brings people to a cult, right? Because, yeah, it's looking for certainty in a really uncertain time. And it's going to someone that talks in a way that comforts you and speaks with so much certainty, even though he can't promise anything. And also, you're not exposing yourself to other news, again, probably because you don't have the time, but also probably because every time you do, you might feel some kind of shame. So you're not looking at sources like ground news, which everybody should check out. And I think it's just a great tool to have in your toolbox. So more on that later. To see where your information is biased or where it's coming from. Because, most of the articles explaining how tariffs are going to raise inflation, yeah, most right-leaning people did not see any of these. Here is an excerpt from Liz Plank that I think really highlights this mindset and can really allow us to build compassion for conservatives. She says, maybe it's not that women and Latinos are betraying themselves, but that poverty and desperation often push people to whoever makes the loudest promises, even when that someone doesn't have their best interest at heart. Right now, 45% of voters say they are worse off financially than they were 4 years ago, marking a record high. These voters weren't misled by media narratives. They're responding to their everyday reality. Skyrocketing costs for groceries, housing, childcare, and healthcare. COVID's impact has left governments weakened worldwide, and many leaders who weather the pandemic have paid the political price. Now, again, if somebody is really just trying to get by, trying to have an enjoyable life, is in a community where people around them are doing the same, have similar beliefs, of course they're going to vote the way that they vote. Are some of them going to be in a cult as well because of the desperation and relief that they want? Yeah. And this reminds me of a quote from The Vow, which is a documentary about the Nexium cult. And they said something along the lines of, nobody thinks they're joining a cult. They think they're joining a good thing. Let that really sink in. So to really understand the conservative mind further, I really looked into this. Again, you can tell where I'm at, but who cares at this point? And I found Corey Robin's book, which is called The Reactionary Mind. I encourage you to get the second edition if you are interested. And if you don't have time for the whole book, and honestly, this guy is so smart. I was like, okay, explain it to me like I'm 10. Watched him in an interview. And I was still like, damn, can you explain it to me like I'm 5? But I linked an article down where he was interviewed by Vox, so you can check that out too if you don't want to check out the whole book. But what he would argue, and some things that he pointed out that I got from his book, and then I'm paraphrasing, are that we need to understand conservative values. So conservatism often centers around tradition, stability, the American dream. And I mean, remember the brain? Hello, stability. My fearful brain wants that. And also the American dream, that's so compelling. That's also going to have you feel a little bit safer because of course you want to believe in it and believe that if you just work hard enough that you can achieve the American dream. And so if you see it in billionaires and see somebody that has been successful at the American dream, of course you're going to want them to quote unquote look after you because you don't see their billions of dollars as luck or timing and maybe some hard work and maybe a good idea. So we want to acknowledge these values to build rapport. We also want to frame change with stability in mind. A lot of times, I was reading about Corey Robin's work, and he argued that progressive ideas seem a little bit too extreme, seem like they were going to wreck the stability of current systems. And so we want to present them as a way to achieve stability, security, and continuity, and show them that we can actually support traditional values rather than threaten them through progressive ideas. We want to identify shared concerns, emphasize areas of common ground like family unity, community welfare, personal agency. We want to show how progressive solutions can benefit these shared priorities. And I think we could all have a common enemy as well and create unity and shared concerns and really show people about billionaires. So more on that in a second. But we can also draw on historical context and show that the past has upheld society's stability and values, and it doesn't mean we have to abandon tradition. We can show that the way things have progressed have helped things be stable and have really aligned with our values of like freedom for all and things like that. Our shared values of like freedom for all. We want to also acknowledge fears and concerns. Y'all hear me talk about this when it comes to social anxiety. You can try to push social anxiety down. Oh, you can try like a beach ball. But if you just keep pushing it, it's just going to keep coming up. It's going to smack you in the face. Like pushing a beach ball down in water. Just, all right. And trust me, I have years of experience of trying to ignore my high functioning social anxiety, and it made it so much worse. And it hurt my belonging. Oh my gosh, all these things. But when we acknowledge it and we have tools and we know how to manage it, completely different. Same goes here, especially for a brain with a larger amygdala, with a larger fear center. We want to acknowledge the fears and concerns and recognize them with empathy and respect. Empathy and respect. We want to see these people as people. Radical, I know. And then I think we could really offer some practical, tangible examples, especially about how progressive approaches can positively impact everyday life. Now, I think there are two things we can really use for that. One, we can use ground news, which is like, hey, you want unbiased news? Check this source out. It's unbiased, and then we'll get it straight because you distrust the media. Same. Ground news. I think that's one resource you can add to your tool belt if you are swaying conservatives. And I think another thing that we can do is create a common enemy who should really be the common enemy, and that is billionaires. All right? Have y'all seen how much money billionaires have compared to the rest of Americans? I can't. Every time I see this graph, I'm always like, are you kidding me? That's where we're at right now. And we could talk about how billionaires aren't about the American dream. That the American dream is for everybody to come here and to be able to be successful in some type of way, and that is not success, in my opinion. We could have conversations about that. I think really having a common enemy with the wealth hoarding and billionaires can be really huge. Anyway, that being said, again, I couldn't find much about democratic ideology that wasn't just like social justice, etc. If you are somebody that is conservative and you're listening to this podcast, I hope that you have paused and, checked in, and I hope that you know that I have respect for you and I want to collaborate with you, and I'm hoping that this podcast helps people also collaborate with you. And I'm talking about swaying, but I don't want you to think of that I'm having you sway to the opposite end of the spectrum. We're trying to sway to the middle so we can collaborate and work together. Both of us, babies. Both sides, babies. And so I have also a little bit of a reality check for my Democrats. Man, y'all. The intellectual elitism. The infantilizing of Trump supporters, the looking down on Trump supporters, the infantilizing of Trump supporters, and honestly, the infantilizing of marginalized identities that happen sometimes. Oof. I am a sociology grad. I'm getting my master's in social work. I am a slut for education. I love learning about policies. I love learning about civic duty. I love being involved. I have to check my intellectual elitism quite a freaking bit. Quite a freaking bit. I'm dealing with people. We're dealing with people. Let's go back to that. And I've also seen so many people in the Democratic Party be like, oh, well, those people on the other side, they are delusional. Those Trump supporters, they are delusional. Babes, we all are a little bit. We are. I mean, we should know that more than anybody, because we have culture, and culture has some delulu notions. Right? We can't pretend that when we are scrolling, we can't pretend that when we are existing in this culture, reading news, anything, that we're not obtaining some biases. Because you know what that sounds like? Thinking that we don't have biases and we're just so intellectual. That sounds like the people that also deny that they have racial, gender, disability biases. Done it? We all have biases. When I was doing my research for this podcast, I found so many articles and things talking about how they were trying to sway people in one end of the spectrum to another. And one thing that was so effective than so many practices, was a Heineken ad. And y'all, it's so good and so fun. Add that to your tool belt. We got Ground News, Making Billionaires Enemies, and we got this Heineken ad. Sit down and watch this with people. It is so effective in having people come together. And Ground News is really helpful because, again, oh, you don't trust the media? Same, babes. Let's check out Ground News. Now, I want to go more into this in depth in general, but you can learn more about calling people in instead of just calling them out from activist Loretta J. Ross. She has a new book coming out. I can't wait to get my little hands on it. Loretta J. Ross, y'all. And I think if we do this, we focus on calling people in, regardless of what side we are on, we can meet more in the middle and start creating the change that we actually want to see. Because if we keep going this way, I don't see it, going super well for us. And that's not me trying to fearmonger, but I think we can make some changes to how we're approaching things, right? Because if we keep shaming, we keep making cartoons and skits and jokes of Republicans, and we keep going about this way, we're not going to have any productive conversations at the least. Now, again, this episode was also about local advocacy, about getting involved locally and not burning out. And I really want to touch on that as well, because that is also a part of fighting compassionately, and I think filling up your cup as well, as you are having these conversations that do take you processing your emotions, being aware of your emotions in order to fight compassionately. We also want to fill up our own cups. So we can do that through our life counsel, and I think we can do that through recognizing that voting is not where our power begins and ends. We are powerful, y'all. Adam Conover did a YouTube video about why he's not worried about the election. And in it, he shared this story that was just wow. He said that he was tired of walking past people experiencing homelessness in his district, in his streets, in his neighborhood. He was like, I was voting on policies, I was voting for politicians, and I was still seeing so many people experiencing homelessness. And I wanted to do something about it. So he said that he got involved with a local organization that combats homelessness, and they helped like 100 people get off the streets and into housing. They saw real change. And then when somebody from their organization ran for local office, they all advocated for that girl like crazy. And now she is in local office, and she's actually making even more change in their district locally. We cannot underestimate the power of that. And so if you want to get involved, if you're like me and you really value civic duty, one, I created a freebie for y'all to check out. I spent so much time on this freebie. It's there to help you figure out what your capacity is and how you really want to give back, and ways that you can find organizations to get involved in, as well as a huge list of national organizations that are probably in your area that you can check out. So let's do that. Voting is not where our power begins and ends. And to do this, we want to choose things that are really going to light us up. Like, choose ways to get involved that are going to feel really, really awesome. And I say this because you might be like, okay, yeah, but I'm fighting for social change. I'm not saying that we don't have some discomfort or that it doesn't take work, but it shouldn't take us sacrificing ourselves completely and burning out, because you know what's going to happen if we do that? We are going to then give up, stop giving back. We're going to have less capacity to spend time with people. We're going to have less patience with people. We're going to have less ability to fight compassionately and with connection if we are burning ourselves out. And so, inspired by the principles of pleasure activism by Adrienne Maree Brown, I hope I said her middle name correctly, we want to fill up your cup. And also, it's going to take some trial and error of figuring out. Okay, I have a personal story with this. I decided I wanted to be a mentor, and y'all, I am working with people one-on-one all the time, and I love it. I love what I do. I love what I do so much that I decided to become a therapist to keep doing it in a different way. Okay, I love working with people one-on-one. And being a mentor probably wasn't the smartest choice for me, because I really needed to be around a community of people rather than just one other person. And I loved it, and I don't regret it. And it was amazing to mentor my kiddo in my area. In the past, it really served me to be a part of organizations like the Citizens Climate Lobby. Really highly recommend checking that out. I was a part of that during the beginning of my business as well. And now that I am, becoming a therapist, I have to have an internship. So I really told my field placement advisor, I need to be in something that is involved with advocacy and that is a part of a big group. I don't need to be working with one-on-one people right now. All right. So it takes some trial and error, and it takes about you getting in touch with what is going to help you fill up your cup. Now, overall, y'all, stop making fun of them. Whatever side you're on, stop making fun of them. Get curious to understand them. And use phrases like "from my understanding" and use I language to talk about your perspectives. This is something I'm going to have to practice a lot, and give yourself so much grace, because this is also going to be more charged with family, people that we have a lot of history with, and a lot of patterns with, and comfortability with, that we're going to be more likely to get defensive, etc. Walk away, give yourself some grace, and come back and fight compassionately. Use I language. Use the things that we talked about today, the perspective that you gained today, to meet people where they are at and talk to them respectfully, compassionately, and then have these resources on hand to sway them. Ground news is a huge one. The Heineken ad, essential. And honestly, if y'all haven't seen it yet anyway already, the Fox News movie, the movie about Fox News called Bombshell, That one right there. I mean, stories are a really great way to persuade someone. Y'all, the goal is to hear them and then be able to collaborate with them. Let's bring civility back into politics. I know in a way that this is just a shout in the void, but I think that more of us talking about this, we could really begin to shape our cultural paradigms and come together and get more things done. And I also want to be really clear that this episode isn't just about persuasion, and that was for a reason. I think I am going to create another episode on that and on communicating more effectively in and out, but this is just more about social change and compassion and fighting that way, meeting people where they are at. But more episodes will be coming in the future, so stay on the lookout. And I also want to say that this isn't just a let me give you all the answers because I know everything, because I don't. And I'm sure that my opinions will evolve as I become even more educated and more aware. But I also want to know what y'all think and what you can contribute to this. Like, what are your thoughts? What would you add to this podcast? We improve collectively through sharing knowledge, sharing perspectives. So share your knowledge and just do so respectfully and compassionately. All right, thank y'all so much for joining me. Go check out that freebie. I put my heart and soul into that. It's something that I would have wanted. Keep those resources on hand. The show notes is jam-packed. I'm delighted that you came here today. Seriously. Thank you. Thanks for joining me on the Socially Delightful podcast. I'm Jewel, and I'm truly so grateful that you came and hung out with me today. If this podcast meant something to you, it would mean so much to me if you left me a review so that way I could keep making content that you love. And if you really want to make my whole day, share this podcast to your Instagram story and tag me at Connection with Jewel so I can shout you out. Or send me a message and let me know what resonated with you or what you want to hear next. And I'll see you at the next episode.